Well, good morning. We are gathered as always for our adult forum. Kolloh works with the Council on Black Minnesotans. She's been a program specialist, community program specialist, close enough, for about the last 7 months. She's a member of our congregation. And keeping with our theme of building bridges this year, Kolloh is going to speak to us about bridging the racial divide. She'll be sharing some of the work of the council and also talking about challenges and opportunities that we have both here at church and in our community and in our state when it comes to bringing people together. So we are grateful that Kolloh is here today. I invite you to give a warm welcome to Kolloh Nimley.
Thank you, Pastor Shirley, and thank you so much, everybody, for being here. I think what I would like to do is to start with a word of prayer. Please pray with me. Dear God, thank you for bringing us here today. As we gather in your presence to talk about the work that you are doing in our midst, may your Holy Spirit guide us and lead us so that we may become your instruments of peace as we build bridges of understanding and peace. Thank you. Guide us now and always. In Jesus' name. Amen. So, building bridges of peace and understanding. How does that look like for us? I've been in Minnesota since 2004. My children and myself moved from England to come here. I've never lived in Minnesota before. I lived in North Dakota. So, so it was a little strange for me. So we moved to Byron, Minnesota. It's not on the map yet. So people ask me, you came from England to Byron, why? And I'm like, oh, I don't know. But I think sometimes we move because God wants us to be in the place where we are. We don't know why. We don't know what His plan is. And it's good that we don't know because sometimes maybe if we know, we might run away. So we were going to church in Byron since we got here in 2004, and I think we joined this congregation when my daughter was going into 7th grade. She's in 9th grade now, so about 3 years ago. And again, the question was, well, you were going to Christ Lutheran Church. Why did you join Zimbro? I don't know. I couldn't give you an answer. But one thing that I do know is I have always prayed for God to use me as His instrument of peace. I don't know how that looked like. So when they say, be careful what you pray for, you really do need to be careful what you pray for. Because sometimes when God said He will use you, I'm ready now. We live in a world of instant gratification. I want to do it and I want to do it now. But do we really know what you want to do? God has to bring you to that point where He starts to open that door for you. And for me, that was the case when I was hired by the Council on Black Minnesotans and to be a community program specialist. I really didn't know what that meant. So I'm like, oh yeah, I've been unemployed for a long time. Yes, it's a job, I can do this. So I went for the interview, and of course you say all the best things you can say, and then I was in the office on April 10th, and I'm like, now what? So my supervisor called me and said, okay, here's are the duties you're supposed to do, build relationship. And I'm like, with who? And he's like, well, you got to go meet with people. And I'm like, but these people are doing exactly what they're supposed to be doing. They are comfortable where they are. And he goes, no, you need to go and bring awareness. And I'm like, awareness for what? So he's like, okay, you need to set up a meeting with somebody. And I'm like, oh, I can do meetings. So I set up my first meeting here in Rochester. And I walked in, and the first question was, so who do you work for? And I'm like, I work for the state. Well, yeah. Department? Oh, I work for the Department of Administration. What do you do? I said, okay, so I work for the State Council on Black Minnesotans. And it was like, okay, so what does that mean? And the person I was meeting with asked me, so what are the black people complaining about now? And I'm like, oh, we're not complaining. I just wanted to meet with you. To introduce myself and, the work that we do and things like that. But the work, what is it? What do we do? So if you look, the Minnesota legislature created the council in 1980. We are charged with the duty to ensure that people of African heritage are fully and effectively participating in the political, social, and economic life of the community. So for Rochester, what does that mean? People need to work. People need to get involved civically. People need to participate in social life. I don't know if it's going out and dancing. I don't know if there's nightclubs here in Rochester, whatever the case may be. So I met with City Council to introduce myself, and they were like, well, yeah, you know, we don't know where the black people are. And I'm like, well, I can sit on the street and actually count how many black people go by. I mean, they are all over the place. What do you mean you don't know where they are? Well, they don't come to City Council meeting. And I'm like, well, where do you post your meetings? You know, some of us don't have TVs. Some of us don't. I don't get a newspaper. You know, so when people say, oh, you in the newspaper all the time, and I'm like, for what? Because I don't see it. You know, so how do you reach out to those people? So my work really is to approach people who are comfortable in their little box, in their political life, whatever that life may be, but move them out of that box, make them uncomfortable. Start to hold them accountable for those things that they say. Well, yeah, we are building an inclusive community. That's the model. When you drive into Rochester, you see that we are building an inclusive community. But how inclusive are we? You know, and I'm saying, okay, so I walk into City Hall and I'm looking at all the employees and I'm like, well, how inclusive are we? There are, Olmsted County population is about 110,000. Of that, 13% is people of African heritage. I don't see any African heritage person in administration. I don't see anybody when I walk in the courts. I don't see anybody when I walk in election. For the last two election cycle, 2010, 2012, I worked for Olmsted County on a temporary basis doing election statistics. So I was the only black person there. So when I went to work, anybody who called with an accent, that call was passed to me because I was the one who understood. You know, now I'm like, okay, so I don't speak all the language. Even though I'm from Africa, I'm only from like one country. I've never been all over Africa. Africa is a continent. But it was the thing because I have an accent, so everybody who called with an accent, I was supposed to be able to understand that. So how do we fit all of that? Because it looks like I'm stirring up a lot of trouble. I make people uncomfortable. I hold people accountable. That's not normal in this society where we know, well, you know, you're supposed to do that. You're supposed to reach for that. You know, you tell me what you want. And I'm saying, no, you tell me what you're going to do for me. Okay? When we put it in the Christian context, we are God's children called by God to do his work. But do we know what work that is? God tells us what to do. He put us where we need to be at the time that he wants us to be there. Other than that, we're not going to move anywhere. But we have to be flexible. We have to be willing to move in that position when he needs us to be there. We have to be ready. So in this world, as God's children, we are in a training camp every single time we are training. What does that mean? How many of you did not go to college but got a degree? Nobody. You have to prove to the world or your professor, who will tell the world that you are qualified to receive this piece of paper. It is a piece of paper, but it carries a lot of weight when they have somebody's signature on it. So how many of us can get certificate from God for being born? He has to train us. He has to make sure that we are ready to receive the blessings that he has for us. But also we have to be ready. We have to be trained so that he's sure that we can do his work. So we are building bridges of understanding and peace. So Pastor Vern on September 21st preached, why is it so important to build bridges anyway? And then he said, well, building bridges is harder than forming a bomb. And I'm like, no, because I build bridges all the time in my work. I do it every day. It's a second nature to me. And then October 2nd came. I had a meeting in Austin. I walked in and sat in the parking lot, and I'm thinking, God help me, because I haven't got a clue what I'm going to say in this meeting or who I'm going to meet with. So I'm walking in, and I'm walking in with the chief of police. That's who I was meeting with. And then he goes, oh, you must be from the Council on Black Minnesotans. And I said, oh, yeah. So we got in the conference room, and we're sitting there, and told him who I was and what we do. And then he turned to me and said, so what are the black people complaining about now? And I said, okay. I said, well, I don't know what they're complaining about, but I was hoping you would tell me what initiatives you have here in Austin and how the council can work with you move those initiatives forward. He said, oh, you want to talk about programming? And I said, if that's okay with you. He goes, no, I have few concerns. And I said, well, I'll listen to your concerns as well. So then he went on. They do not have respect for police officer or law enforcement for that matter. They do not listen to anybody. They do not make a 911 call. And I'm like, wait a minute, who's they? Who are we talking about? Well, their children or their parents. And I'm like, and who are they? The black people. And I said, oh, okay. So keep going. So he went and I said, okay. So we arrest them. And I'm like, wait a minute. They don't call you, but somehow you arrest them. How do you do that? Well, we have officers in the schools. And I said, so you are arresting the kids? He goes, well, no. We escort the kids to school. And I said, do you follow the school bus or do you put them in a police car? How do you escort? So they're home. Well, we arrest them first and then we send them we send the parent a letter. And I said, so you are arresting children? He goes, well, I wouldn't put it that way. And I said, okay, how would you put it? Well, we are just trying to teach the children a lesson. And I said, a lesson in the jail or in the police car? What kind of lesson are you teaching? I thought the school was doing the teaching part. So, and then he said, well, you know what? Whatever it is, we go to the doors, we knock at the door. And I said, wait a minute, you go to the doors and knock at the door, but they don't call you though. So how do you get to the door? Are you like stalking them? Are you intentionally sitting in the neighborhood to go to the door? So this went on for a little bit, and then he said, well, you know what? I'm not going to play games with you because you know what? If they don't change, we'll just continue to arrest them. And I said, that's great. But you will need a whole lot big jail because you know what? The black people are here and they're not going anywhere. And there's more coming. So you either change your mindset and start to understand the cultures that you have here, or you're going to have to resign, one of the two. So I'm having a community meeting. You are invited to come and start to learn about the culture of the people in your community. That meeting is on Sunday, October 15th. He goes, do you know that's football day? I said, okay, so who's playing? Well, the Vikings and the Green Bay are playing, and I'm a Green Bay fan. And I'm like, so what time does the game start? Well, it goes anywhere from 10 o'clock to 10 p.m. And I'm like, okay, so when they like halftime, you can come to the meeting. He goes, no, that's really interrupting my schedule. I said, okay, well, if watching football is more important to you than the community where you live and work, that's fine. You can go ahead and watch football. I'm sure it will be in the newspaper. I'll send you update after the meeting. And the mayor came in and he said, no, we will go to the meeting. And if you can't make it, you will send somebody to represent the police department because guess what? We are going to understand this culture. So I met with the Sudanese community in Austin. And of course, they have a whole long list of complaints too. How they are arresting our kids, they harassing us, and stuff like that. And I said, okay, so who's your mayor? Well, we don't know. Okay, so who's the chief of police? We don't know either. And I said, okay, so what have you done to reach out? Because here's the thing, my word is always a two-way street. That's how communication works. So I'm saying, okay, you can complain all you want. I can fix it, one thing. Because you live here, you have to fix it. You can't fix it on your own. You have to work together. So I said, okay, let's do this meeting. I'll bring the mayor. I'll introduce the mayor to you. They want a community center. And I said, okay, for what? What are you going to do? Well, for meetings. And I said, well, can you ask city council to meet in city hall for a meeting or something? Well, no, we want to provide services. What kind of services? Well, we want to provide English as a second language. And I said, well, there's a Catholic church in town that do that. There's a Methodist church here that does that. St. Olaf Lutheran Church in town, where you guys have services, also provide those kind of services. Why don't you just go there? Well, but that's not good enough. And I said, okay, so how are you going to get a community center? Well, we've been begging for it for the last 5 years. And I said, from who? Well, we just been talking about it. And I said, okay, so you haven't been begging. You've been talking about it. It's a good idea. But you got to bring it to a discussion level. You have to talk to city council because they are the people who will make that approval say yes or no. So now, in Austin, the African heritage people are attending city council meetings. They are talking to the mayor. They are talking to the chief of police. I'm out of the picture. That's what I do. That's how I build those bridges. Because when God moved me to that point, I'm able to say, okay, I understand your complaint. I understand your complaint. Bring it together. I don't live in Austin. But that October 2nd day, as I was leaving, I'm like, okay, this is it. I'm done. Because I can't do this anymore. I'm going to call my supervisor and say I'm going to look for another job. So I'm driving, and then Pastor Shelley emailed me, can you do a presentation on building bridges? And I'm like, today is the last day I want to talk about building bridges because I can't do this. You know, I'm coming from a meeting where I have no idea what happened. I couldn't even recapture the whole meeting. I was like, that just didn't happen. But when we think about the story of Jonah in the Bible, Jonah was totally going the other way. He's like, God, you need to destroy this country, and you don't need me to do that because guess what? All you got to do is speak the word because these people are so bad. And God said, okay, but you're going where I want you to go. So when I got back to the office on October 2nd, I called my supervisor, and so he picked up the phone and he started laughing, and I'm like, that's not funny. Why are you laughing? He goes, because I know what you're going to say. And I'm like, how do you know? He goes, because usually when you call me, you are already smiling and happy and stuff like that. This call is not one of them. And I'm like, yeah, because I'm not going back to Austin. And then he goes, yeah, you are. You are going back to Austin. And so I had to take back and say, and I went back, I read Pastor Vern's sermon, and I said, okay, it is really a hard work to build bridges. But it is not my work. It is God's work. It's in my hands that's doing it. So I went back to Austin. And I walked in, and the police officer was like, you know, I'm really sorry for our first meeting. And I said, well, you know, it went so well, I don't even remember what happened. And he said, well, you know, that's the way life goes, because sometimes those things that are uncomfortable for us, we turn not to remember. And I said, oh, I remember what it was, but I just didn't know what I accomplished that day. Because I felt like I didn't accomplish anything, because I didn't help you understand, you know, that I wasn't here to only hear complaints. I was also here to hear the positive things that are happening here in Austin. He goes, oh, okay. So now we are on good working relationship. But the work of building bridges and of understanding and peace is not always easy, because God does not call us to an easy life. As His children, we are called to follow Him, but He never promised that once you decide to follow me, it will be really easy. You will have an easy life. But so therefore, Paul called us to learn in the book of Timothy, to learn that we prove ourselves. But proving yourself, we cannot do it on our own. So Jesus also promised that He will never leave us nor forsake us. And I hold him very responsible for that promise. Because when things don't go right, and I'm like, okay, Jesus, you really are not here. Because you promised that you will never leave me nor forsake me. Show me that you are always here with me. Every morning before I go to work, before I start my work, before I turn my computer on in my office, I always pray that God be with me, that nothing will happen to me today that you and I together cannot handle. Because I don't know. Every day that I walk into that office, I don't know what's going to happen. Last week, Monday, I walked into work, and a lady called me and said, I need help. And I said, okay, with what? Well, my daughter's going to John Marshall. She has a 3.9 GPA. She's in 10th grade. I want her to do post-secondary education at RCTC, the school won't let her. I said, okay, I should know this, because I got kids too. And I'm like, well, I really don't know. But because I work for the government, I have to work with legislation. So I started digging. Thank God for whoever created Google, because that's like amazing. So I started thinking, okay, so post-secondary. Last year they just made the changes. Before, it only used to be 11th and 12th grade that could take college classes while they are in high school. But last year they added 10th grade. So the reason for that is if the children go to places like RCTC, they can get their 2 years AA degree the same time that they can graduate from high school. So then it saves the parent 2 years of college, so they just go for two more years to get their bachelor degree. That's what this woman wants her daughter to do. And the school is saying no, and I said, okay, so have you talked to the superintendent? She said no, and I said, well, maybe that's a good place to start. If you already spoken with the principal and the principal says no, the next thing you need to do, go to the superintendent. And then she goes, well, what do I say? And I said, well, I will get the legislation, I will cut out all the words you need to say. All you got to do is memorize and go do it. So I sent her the information, but then I also went to the post-secondary office at RCTC, and I said, okay, what relationship do you have with the public school here in Rochester? So then I gathered all of that information and gave it to her. Do you see what's happening here though? I'm not on the front line. I'm empowering her to speak for herself because I cannot do that. If I had to speak for every black person in Rochester alone, I could sell my kids for a penny and not even notice. Because there's a lot of people who have issues and things like that. And I said, okay, that's all well and good, but you have to be on that front line. So my work, I'm on the back line, but I'm also on the front line because when it comes to communicating with our legislators, that's what I do. So I meet with our legislator and say, okay, here's the concern that the community have. I collect all the data. And then they say, okay, do you think we need to create a bill, or do we have anything that we need to amend, or do we need to, is this something that we can address at the local level? So then I have to bring the community and government leaders together to say, okay, you guys got to battle this out. If I have to put you in a room so you figure out an answer, that's what I do, but I'm not going to be there. So here in Rochester, the police department have a new program called Intelligent-Led Policing. It sounds really good. SPSS and Identity Insight. So what that does is they collect data on kids, on people living in Rochester, people coming to Rochester, people leaving Rochester. And then they say, okay, this person is at risk for committing a crime. So then they follow you all over the place, everywhere you go. They follow you, they know your address because they can track your driver license and follow you directly to in your garage. This is a computer system, so you don't see any physical person there, but they are there. So then the local NAACP came to me and said, we think that's profiling. And I said, okay, tell me why. Because I think it's a good thing. And they say, well, first of all, they're collecting data. Do the people know what data they are collecting, how that data is going to be used, where is the data stored, how long they're going to have the data. So if they say, right now in the state of Minnesota, if you are 14 years old and you commit a crime, when you turn 18, that criminal record goes away, it doesn't follow you. Well, with SPSS, they keep that record. So I said, okay, so what's your concern? Well, if they kept a record on a 14 years old kid, what are the chances of that kid getting into college? What are the chances of that getting a job? Because everybody do background check, and then if that record show up, what's going to happen? And I said, okay, let's talk to the chief of police. Let's see what he says. Well, this is going to be great. City Council already approved $1.8 million on this project. So I said, all right, let's go to City Council. And it was on their consent agenda, which means that they don't even have to talk about it. They just say yes or nay, then they go. And I said, well, let's pull that. Let's try to talk about this a little bit more. So they pulled it, and I said, okay, who's going to be impacted in Rochester? Southeast Rochester? Who lives in Southeast Rochester? The poorer people in Rochester. Most of those people are on welfare here in the city. And they have lots of kids, but the parents are working maybe 2-3 jobs because they make $7.25. So the children are unsupervised most of the time, which leaves children with the opportunity to do something wrong because they got to test out. So I said, okay. So why aren't we including northwest, southwest, Rochester? I mean, if we're doing it for the city of Rochester, why don't we just cover the whole city? Well, because this is the area where we have the most crime taking place. And I said, okay, then we don't need a computer system to do that. We already know crime takes place in Southeast Rochester. Let's just go sit there. Well, no, it will help the police department to save money because it will reduce how many officers we have on the road. And I said, okay. So city council said, okay, it's police department and Council on Black Minnesotans work together to kind of create community forums, engage the community, provide this information to the community, and then come back and report to us. So we did that. We did 2 of those meetings, and then the chief of police said, no, I'm not going to do it anymore. And I said, okay, so that's fine. I said, so then it got my mind going strangely. I started digging into other things that the state has. This program does violate your data privacy according to Minnesota law. It also violates your civil liberties rights as well. So I said, okay, so how are we going to ensure that we protect those rights of the people that we're talking about? So if you can see, it starts with people of African heritage, but now it's everybody, because it's not only people of African heritage have those rights, you do too. So I said, all right, so if we're going to do that, that we need to be compliant with state and federal law. So that Minnesota has a checklist. When you do these kind of things that you check off, you say, yes, I met that, yes, I met that. And I said, can we do that with this program? The chief of police said no. I said, all right. Part 1 of this program is already in use here in Rochester. It's been going on since 2012. So in that program, he said they have 72 prolific offenders in Rochester. 85% of those people are people of African heritage. Now, in Rochester, of the 106,000 people that live here, African heritage people only make up 5.5% of that population. How is it that we have 85% of African heritage people in this system already as prolific offenders? There's an imbalance there. So I said, all right, what else can we do? He said, well, we need to have diversity within our workforce. So then he hired a black police officer, and I said, that's not good enough. When we talk about diversity, what does that look like? What does it mean? I said, I don't want to be a police officer. I'm a black person. But we need to have cultural competence of the people that you have. Meaning, when a black person walks in the door, that police officer needs to understand the culture of that person. That's what competency means. So we need to train people to understand that here in Rochester, we have diversity. And how does that diversity look like? How do we deal with those people? Just because I'm a black person doesn't mean that I'm from Chicago. I don't even understand the English they speak in Chicago most of the time. But law enforcement trying to group people together. Black people are inherently criminals. So therefore, if you are a black person, you fit that stereotype. It doesn't mean that I'm from Liberia, West Africa, and yeah, we do commit crimes in Liberia, but it's kind of different the way they do here. I would never be smart enough to sell drugs because I don't know how it works. You know, so just because I'm a black person does not fit me in that group of people. That you need to understand me as an individual. And I think God is the best teacher because he does that very well. He understands who he created. He understands who we are. He knows us by name. So when we build bridges, we are never alone building those bridges. So when I hold people accountable, sometimes I have to look behind me when I leave and be like, okay, God, I know you got my back, because this is not comfortable for people here. People here in this society are not comfortable with being held accountable for what they say and do. I met with a city official here about 2 months ago, and he said to me, you know, I don't understand on Martin Luther King Day when we march from City Hall to Peace Plaza and we chanting, why do we want freedom? When do we want it now? Don't we already have freedom? I said, oh yeah, we do. We have freedom. The problem is most of us don't know how that freedom looks like. We haven't touched it. We have not experienced it. We may have seen it, but we don't know how it looks like. So how do we bring about that freedom? How do we bring about peace? How do we start to see each other in the image of God instead of you are black and white? How do we do that? We can only do it by the grace of God that leads us to start to build those bridges. It is not an easy work. We have to be open-minded. We have to reach out. We have to make ourselves vulnerable in order for God to use us. Because we are the foundation that Jesus talked about. When he said to Peter, I will build my foundation. I will plant my seed here. This is where the seed is. And if we don't pray, if we don't act, that peace, that understanding may never be touched or experienced by our brothers and sisters. And so as God called us today to build bridges of understanding and peace, as we approach the holy holidays, starting with Thanksgiving, we have a lot to be thankful for. I have a lot to be thankful for. I'm very thankful for where God has brought me, my children, and the work that he has given me to do. But I know that that work, in order for me to be successful, I cannot do it on my own. I do need this community here of Christ to be the foundation that build me up to move forward as I go every single day and face sometimes good people, sometimes bad people, sometimes very good intentioned people. Sometimes I don't really know who they are. And I don't know how those intentions look like. But also within ourselves, a family that prays stay together. And when we move forward, as we leave here today, my younger son told me one time that I go to church to get refill every Sunday, because when we come here and get refill, we are able to go out there. When God fills us up, we are able to go out and give. And then at the end of the week, we come back, because God knows we will always come back. We should always come back. We should always be in touch with our Father, because he is the only one who can fill us up. Because when he gives us that peace that reflects to the people around us, his love for us is not only for us. So God is building bridges in my life so that I am able to go out and build bridges in other people's lives as well. Because I cannot build my own bridges. He is the only one that can do that for me. And so I'm very, very thankful for Sandy. She is always watching out for me, praying for me, and sending me those newspaper articles that, because I don't get a newspaper, and people come to me and say, you are always in the newspaper, but I know the next day or two, I can always count on it. I will get a mail from her, and it is that newspaper article. So I have all of those articles that I don't know about, because she is always watching out for me. She is my angel that God has given me to continue to build those bridges in my life as I go out to build bridges in other people's lives. So now I will open it up to questions, if you have any questions.
Why don't you get a newspaper?
Because I can't afford it, it's too expensive.
Thank you for telling us about this council, which I really didn't know much about. How long has it been in existence?
Since 1980.
And how large is the statewide staff? Is it a big staff?
No, we got 3.
So I love how you talked about taking people out of their comfort zone. I think that's so important for us to remember. In a stalemate, and you go right in there and you shove people left and right. I think that's awesome. I think you have a way about you that no matter if people agree with you or not, they're going to listen. You seem like you have a very open heart and open mind. Do you travel just in this, around the southeast, southwest part of Minnesota, or are you all over Minnesota?
So since the council started, this is the first office that we have opened outside of the Twin Cities. So I'm responsible for southeast Minnesota. So I travel I haven't been to all the cities yet because I'm trying to figure out which cities actually fall within Southeast Minnesota. Because sometimes people think I should be in Mankato, and I'm like, that's a little too far away. It's not in Southeast Minnesota, is it? So I'm trying to confine myself. Yeah, so I've been to Faribault and Austin, and but I'm in communication with all of the Southeast Minnesota legislators. So I meet with them or teleconference with them on a regular basis, especially now that we're coming up to the legislative session. Everybody wants me to attend every session, and I'm like, okay, so we are in Minnesota, and it starts in January. I don't like driving in the snow, so I'll pick and choose which one I want to go to. But yes, I am responsible for Southeast Minnesota, but right now we only have 3 staff on the council: the executive director, who's in the Twin City, and then the program specialist, who's responsible for the metro area, and then my office here in Rochester. So.
You were quoted in the paper several times regarding the Ferguson, Missouri situation. Would you say something about that to us?
Absolutely. So the situation in Ferguson, I think it's a unique situation, and I am not surprised because Minnesota, the diversity, the disparities that we experience in Minnesota is not unique to the state of Minnesota. They are all throughout the United States, except that we are really nice about it. Other states, not so much. So the situation in Ferguson, Missouri, the way I see it in 2 ways. I totally understand the frustration. Just killing somebody's child is not an okay thing. As a parent, I don't know what I would do if that happened to me. But at the same time, it does not give me the right to destroy, to riot, and things like that. I think this is where, if they had a council on Black Minnesotans in that state, this is where would be a really good time to bring the communities together to talk. It's not about the legal system, because in the legal system, we will look at the legal system, the way it's set up. And I'm telling you, legal in the United States does not equal ethics. Ethics is way out here somewhere. The way we look at ethics as Christians is not the same way the legal system look at it. So something that may be totally ethical to us is totally illegal in the legal system. So it takes communication. It's a lack of communication and people being emotionally charged about this situation that brings about it. I do not agree with the fact that Michael Brown was killed and the way it happened. But I also do not agree that people should destroy and riot because of that. Yes, we lost him. It is a very hard thing to do for the parents and families and close friends or whatever. But this could be an opportunity for the community to really start to create and understand that cultural competence. What does it mean? Maybe the question would be, what does it mean to live as a Black person in Missouri? I don't know. And that could lead into a lot of understanding that could bring unity within that community. But we continue to pray for them as they wait for the jury decision. I don't know how it's going to turn out. Some people already assuming, well, they're going to not convict him or they're going to, whatever the case may be. We pray that the Spirit of God will be there with them so that, people can heal and be able to move and work together and live together in that community. Yes.
Now, in Rochester, there's a wide diversity of nationalities. Is there a line drawn with your group compared to, say, those from
Hispanic?
the East or Hispanic, or et cetera? Because I know in our neighborhood we have, right in our neighborhood, there's probably 6 or 7 different nationalities.
Yeah. So there are 4 minority councils that the legislation created. The Chicano Latino Affairs Council have a representative here in Rochester just like me, and we work very closely together on some of the things. In fact, this week, Tuesday, we had a meeting with the Commissioner for Human Rights, who his office has been going around the state talking with community about getting rid of the councils And so that meeting was here this Thursday, last week, Thursday the 20th, here in Rochester. And so I was in the newspaper again. So, so my supervisor sent it to me and said, hey, good meeting. And I'm like, oh, okay, that's fine. But part of the things that we do, we work with, there is Asian Pacific Council, Chicano Latino Affairs Council, Native American Council, and Council on Black Minnesotans. That's 4, right? Okay, good. So, so our legislation, while they were created in different years, still holds us to the same. The language is the same. That we need to work with our communities to get socially, politically, and economically involved in the life of the state. So we work very closely together with those councils to look at issues that are impacting the community as a whole. We have been in communication with the Asian Pacific Council, especially as it has to do with the Destination Medical Center here in Rochester, and the language in the legislation that said that minorities will have access to the construction jobs that are created. And we said, no, everybody should have access to all of the jobs that are created by DMC, not just the construction job. I don't want to lay a brick, I want to type a letter to somebody. And so allow me the opportunity to do that. If I do not know how to use the computer, then we need to find a way to say, okay, here's a company that will be able to train you to be able to do that. But you cannot restrict people to certain jobs and then everybody else have access to the rest of the jobs. So.
I also read about you in the paper speaking about the Ebola situation. What is your thoughts about that?
Okay, so I am from Liberia, West Africa. My brother is the chief pharmacist in the country and has been very, very diligent in dealing with the situation with the Ebola outbreak in Liberia. I'm also working on my PhD and currently taking my course on issues in world health, which is perfect because I'm saying, okay, I communicated with the executive director for World Health Organization to say, okay, so we heard about the first case of Ebola in the Ivory Coast in March of 2014. We did absolutely nothing because, this was not something that was going to happen. Having had the experience with Ebola before, we know how it spreads. So why didn't we do something in March until the middle of the year? And now people are dying. Well, the excuse for WHO was that, well, we are understaffed and we don't have money. And I said, okay, the real issue is there is no plan that they can execute for outbreaks like this. They don't have a strategic plan on how to deploy people to deal with these situations. So I said, okay, for my dissertation, if you give me the money, I'll create a plan for you that you can deploy anywhere in the world. You don't need 10,000 staff or you don't need $1 million you can deploy on a penny. So we are in communication with that. But the unique thing about what's happening in Liberia is I think it brings different things to light. One, Liberia being an American colony, which America can never have a colony because we are really good about that. We perfect. We can't take slavery at all. So enjoy the privilege of having that tie to the United States. But when you want to gain independence, breaking that tie is a very hard thing. So Liberia did that in 1989. And so therefore the Civil War that went on. So by the end of the Civil War, Liberia really had no healthcare infrastructure, no effective public health system in that country. So therefore the break out of the Ebola really had an access because there's no system in place to protect anything. So now Liberia, I'm hoping, keep my fingers crossed and praying to God, that sooner or later the World Health Organization will announce Liberia Ebola free because we haven't had any new cases for the last 3 weeks now. So moving strong, but after that there's really no infrastructure to talk about in terms of healthcare. So people are dying from other diseases like common colds and diarrhea and malaria because the health system is not existing as we speak. So moving forward, I am proposing to the United Nations, the World Health Organization, World Bank, and the International Monetary Fund to, I'm not asking for temporary fix. I'm talking about building up a non-existing healthcare system to its pre-conflict status so that that country will be able to move forward. But also in the process, training people to be able to maintain what we are building. So, yeah, I hope it works.
I thought you might know something about that. Any other questions? Thank you. Thank you for a great presentation.
Thank you so much.